The night in my grandmother's village was never truly silent. It was a symphony of quiet, natural sounds that usually brought me a sense of deep peace. Crickets chirped their endless song from the tall grasses, and the gentle rustle of banana leaves was like the world breathing softly around me. The air, thick with the smell of damp earth, and the last embers of cooking fires clung to my skin. But on this particular night, something felt wrong. The familiar chorus of the village night seemed to have paused, holding its breath in anticipation. A heavy stillness had descended, silencing even the most persistent insects. It was a quiet so profound, so unnatural, that it made the hairs on my arms stand on end. I was young then, visiting my grandmother during the school holidays. Her house was a simple wooden structure raised on stilts, with wide open windows that let the night air flow freely. I lay on a thin mattress on the floor trying to fall asleep, but my eyes remained wide open, staring into the oppressive darkness of the room. The usual comfort of the familiar space had vanished, replaced by a growing sense of unease that I could not explain. Every shadow seemed to stretch and twist, playing tricks on my mind. I could hear my own heart, a frantic drumbeat against the silence, and I pulled the thin blanket tighter around my shoulders, as if it could somehow protect me from the unseen thing that felt so very close. The moon was hidden behind a thick blanket of clouds, casting the world outside into an inky blackness. I could just make out the silhouettes of the tall trees against the even darker sky. They stood like silent, watchful giants, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching for the house. The usual gentle breeze had died down completely, leaving the air stagnant and heavy. I remember feeling a strange pressure, a weight in the atmosphere that made it difficult to breathe normally. It was the kind of quiet that precedes a storm, but there was no sign of rain, only a deep, unsettling stillness that felt ancient and full of secrets. My grandmother had always told us stories, tales meant to teach and to warn. She spoke of the spirits that walked among us, unseen but ever present. She taught us to be respectful, to never speak ill of the dark, and to be wary of certain signs. I thought of her words as I lay there, feeling a cold dread creep into my bones. The silence was more than just an absence of sound, it felt like a presence. It was a listening silence, a waiting silence. Something was out there in the darkness of the village, and its attention felt fixed, focused, and slowly drawing nearer to our small, vulnerable home. It started with a smell. At first it was faint, a delicate floral scent that drifted in through the open window on a non-existent breeze. It was the sweet fragrance of frangipani flowers, a smell I usually loved. In the daylight, it reminded me of temple offerings and joyous celebrations. But at night, my grandmother had warned, the sudden scent of frangipani carried a different, more sinister meaning. It was a sign, she said, a herald of a specific kind of presence. As the fragrance grew stronger, my heart began to pound even harder in my chest. This was not the gentle, pleasant scent of a nearby tree. This was concentrated, overwhelming, and it felt chillingly deliberate. Local beliefs are woven into the very fabric of village life, passed down through generations until they are as real as the ground beneath your feet. We were taught that the Kuntilanak, the ghost of a woman who died during childbirth, announces her presence in two distinct ways. When her frangipani scent is strong, it means she is far away. But when the scent becomes faint, almost disappearing, it means she is right beside you. This chilling paradox, was at the forefront of my mind as the sweet smell filled the room, so potent it felt like I could taste it on my tongue. It was a beautiful smell, but it was laced with pure, undiluted terror. The floral aroma began to change, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. A new note crept in, something foul and decaying that soured the sweetness. It was the smell of old blood, a coppery, metallic stench that made my stomach churn. The beautiful frangipani was now mixed with the putrid odor of something long dead, a horrifying combination that assaulted my senses and confirmed my deepest fears. The beautiful woman was not beautiful at all. She was something broken, something filled with sorrow and rage. The air grew colder, a damp chill that had nothing to do with the night and everything to do with the unnatural presence that was now undeniably close. I squeezed my eyes shut, hoping that if I couldn't see anything, it would all go away. But the sounds started then, and they were impossible to ignore. It began as a soft cry, like a woman weeping in the distance. The sound was filled with such profound sadness that for a moment I almost felt pity, but then the crying began to change. It grew louder, higher, morphing into a shrill, piercing shriek that was no longer human. It was a laugh, a high-pitched, cackling laugh that echoed through the silent night, cutting through the air like a shard of glass. It was the sound of madness and despair, and it was coming from right outside the window. Fear finally won. I had to see. I couldn't bear the not knowing any longer, the terror of my own imagination. Slowly, trembling uncontrollably, I crept from my mattress and crawled towards the window. My movements were clumsy, my limbs heavy with dread. Every creak of the wooden floorboards sounded like a scream in the oppressive silence between the creature's horrifying laughs. I peeked over the windowsill, my eyes scanning the darkness, desperately searching for the source of the sound and the smell. For a moment, I saw nothing but the familiar shapes of the night, the trees, the path, the neighbor's fence. Maybe it was just my imagination, maybe it was a bird. And then I saw her. She was standing beneath the large banana tree at the edge of the yard, partially obscured by its broad, drooping leaves. She was a figure cloaked in white, a long, flowing garment that looked like a traditional burial shroud. It was stained and dirty, hanging loosely on her frame. Her back was to me, and all I could see was her long black hair. It was impossibly long, a tangled, matted cascade that reached almost to the ground, swaying slightly even though there was no wind. The sight of her, so still and silent now, was somehow more terrifying than the shrieking laughter had been. She just stood there, waiting. As if she could feel my eyes on her, she began to turn. The movement was slow, unnatural, and jerky, like a puppet being controlled by an unsteady hand. My breath hitched in my throat, and a cold sweat broke out across my entire body. I wanted to look away, to run and hide under my blanket and pretend I had seen nothing, but I was frozen in place, a prisoner of my own terror. Her head rotated slowly, the long black hair parting to reveal the side of her face. It was impossibly pale, a luminous, ghostly white that seemed to glow faintly in the profound darkness of the night. Then she faced me fully. The image is burned into my memory, a scar on my mind that will never fade. Her face was a mask of pure tragedy and horror. Her eyes were hollow, black pits, empty voids that seemed to suck in all the light and hope from the world. But what was worse, far worse, was the gaping, bloody hole in her back, visible through a tear in the white shroud. It was a gruesome, dark wound from which the faint, coppery smell of decay seemed to emanate. Her lips, pale and cracked, stretched into a wide, silent grin, and she raised a single, long-fingered hand and pointed directly at me. The laughter started again, but this time it was inside my head. I don't remember screaming. I only remember the world turning black as I scrambled away from the window, my mind shutting down to protect itself from the sheer horror of what I had witnessed. The next thing I knew, my grandmother was holding me, her arms wrapped tightly around my shaking body. She was murmuring prayers, her voice a calming anchor in the storm of my fear. The room was no longer cold. The terrible smell of decay and frangipani had vanished, replaced by the familiar, comforting scent of clove oil that my grandmother always wore. The shrieking laughter was gone, and the only sound was my own ragged, desperate sobbing. My grandmother didn't ask what I had seen. She already knew. She simply held me, rocking me gently until the sun began to rise, chasing away the long shadows and the deep-seated fears of the night. She never spoke of the incident directly, but in the days that followed, she performed small rituals around the house, leaving offerings of flowers and rice and burning incense to appease the spirits and strengthen the protective barriers around our home. Her actions were a silent acknowledgement of the reality I had confronted. She knew the veil between worlds was thin here, and that sometimes, if you looked too closely, you could see what waited on the other side. That night changed everything for me. Before that encounter, ghosts and spirits were just stories, tales told around a fire to frighten children. They were thrilling, but they weren't real. They belonged to the world of imagination. But after seeing the Kuntilanak with my own eyes, after smelling her presence and hearing her sorrowful rage, I could no longer live in the comfort of disbelief. The supernatural was not a concept, it was a reality. It was a woman in a stained white shroud with a hole in her back, standing under a banana tree in the dead of night. It was real, and it was terrifying. I now understand that the world is much larger and more mysterious than what we can see and touch. That experience did not make me a ghost hunter or a thrill seeker. On the contrary, it filled me with a profound sense of respect and caution for the unseen world. It was like a door had been opened in my mind, a door I could never fully close again. I learned that some things are not meant to be understood, only to be acknowledged. And I learned that when the night falls silent and the air fills with the sudden, sweet scent of frangipani, it is time to close the window, say a prayer, and not look outside.